The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight. Those here in the chat room and those listening from around the world, we appreciate each and every one of you. Tonight we got a good show lined up for you, and we're waiting for my guest to get online. But until then, I'll introduce you to the rest of the people. Tonight we got with us Barbara Duncan.
Good evening, everybody.
And we got Jeffrey Gould.
Hello, hello. Happy Krampus night.
All right.
Or not.
That's exactly what it is, too. And that's exactly what we'll be talking about tonight, too, is Krampus. So,
not to be confused with a very disappointing movie by Michael.
Oh, let's not bring up that movie, shall we?
I was so looking forward to that.
That Krampus in that movie was just like a Muppet.
Yeah, it didn't even have a moving jaw. It's just like, I'm like, dude, how many, just bring up Krampus on an image search, and you got all these incredible stuff. And then he's just like, yeah, we'll just stick a desiccated mummy-looking thing in a Santa suit. I'm like, no. What? You made Trick or Treat. Why are you making this like this?
It was pretty bad.
Even the poster gave away.
Even as a Krampus was not that good. I mean,
when they finally got around to him,
yeah.
I'm like, have you ever seen Rare Exports?
No.
It is a Scandinavian comedy horror film about that Santa was more of a Krampus creature, and that he had been somehow sealed up in a tomb for years and years and years, and an archaeologist company goes in and brings him out, and he's encased in ice. And there are these they were referred to as Santa's helpers, but these odd little bearded men that were like his minions, and they were trying to help not only rescue the Krampus Santa Claus, but they were kidnapping children in the town so that he could punish them when he was released from this ice flow.
we're adding our guest.
Yay!
How are you?
Woohoo!
And we have Lillee with us.
Yes, I do.
Uh,
The COVID caverned Lillee, yes.
Oh no!
well, before you start talking, we're going to have Jeff introduce you.
Okay.
Oh yes. Get up here, back up here. So our guest tonight is Lillee Allee, student of religion, spirituality, and paranormal investigation for over 40 years. She's the widow of internationally known dark magician John D. Allee. Lillee continues to consult in paranormal investigations, and her specialties include, but are not limited to, Marian and cultural, spiritual phenomena and apparitions, and spiritual support to teams and clients who want spiritually counseling after investigations. I'm sure the Destination Fear team certainly needs that. She also works with EVP work and old school audio, the accuracy and research of past life regeneration, and seance and spiritual protection. She was also one of the first to incorporate training canines into paranormal investigations. And she hosts a radio program here on Para-X network, Happy Medium, with Deborah Ann Freeman. And she co-authored the book.
Aeon Now. It's now called New Aeon Now with
New Aeon
Davron and Christine Motza. We switched it around recently.
There you go.
Allowed us to be a lot more general in what we were talking about. Because after, what was it, like 5 years, there's just so much you can talk about with mediums. And there was so much else going on in the world that we wanted to go to that route.
There you go. So welcome, Lillee Allee.
Thank you.
Oh, you forgot one thing. She knows more about
Okay.
Krampus than most people on the planet.
I was raised with Krampus.
So are you his helper?
As like a nanny or something?
Yeah, he was my nanny. You didn't know? That's why I'm the way I am. Yeah, that makes total
Barbara
sense.
and I were just before you came on. She and I were commiserating of how bad Michael Dougherty's movie was.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Bad is relative. Okay, and I don't like to slam anybody's artwork, but that wasn't as much to my liking, though I've continued to research that, and I found that a lot of it is nice. I mean, when I was a kid, nobody knew about Krampus, okay? And the original way to say it is Krampen, which means claw. Germans are very, very literal. Do you know what I mean? Claw.
Yeah.
So claw would come by, and it fascinates me because you have to wonder if it was even at one point Santa Krampen versus Santa Claus, but that's all lost to history in a lot of ways. However, Krampus is really a neat character. How I was raised with him was that tonight, okay, would be Krampusnacht, okay? And that's the night where you get your comeuppance, all right? And in the way my family, Americanized, celebrated was this night, Krampus comes, okay? And if I'm alive the next morning and in my bed, that's a good sign. You go downstairs to your breakfast, and in your plate is either a gift or coal, or worse yet, nothing. Okay? Coal being not a good sign, you better really get your act together before Christmas Eve. A present meaning you've been a good kid, and the cost and fun of the present is even more stating not only about your parents' wealthiness, but also, you know, that you were a better kid. And nothing means he's still watching you, which is even more horrifying if you think about it.
Yeah, that's kind of, paranoid, but yeah.
Now, my cousin used to get, are you ready for this? Every year she would get and she's about 20 years older than I am, and she would get a orange and nuts. So that's how they did it in the Depression. But poor Krampus, I mean, he's getting his just desserts now, but you have to remember the belief was considered fascist at one point. The whole idea of it has continually been come under fire, and really it's a tradition, if you will, where we as children, okay, and there's nothing more serious about being a German child, I can just tell you. We as children were told how we add up, okay? And it was a great way to get us to do more cleaning for the holidays, okay? More assistance in baking. I mean, the parents had the right idea here. But, you know,
Sure.
people are against Krampus. I don't know why, but, you know, I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, let me ask you, Lillee, then this new phase or fad of Elf on a Shelf, because it seems to me that's just as or worse psychologically than Krampus ever could be.
Well, Elf on the Shelf isn't going to tie you up and whip you with sticks and drown you in the river.
Yeah.
Okay.
Depending on the memes.
Elf on a Shelf is a watered down Krampus. Yes, absolutely. No question there. And yeah, it's a little creepy. But many of us who are brought up in the Catholic tradition also had the Virgin Mary in the house. And so she was always watching too.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? So depending on how the child was raised, I don't think it's going to be as frightening. But I do know some parents that did not get the results, shall we say, they wanted because the kids were constantly hiding the elf on the shelf because it creeped them out.
Well, I know back in the 50s when I was growing up, I'd never heard of Krampus, and I didn't actually get into it or hear about it until I was started doing this radio show, getting into the paranormal.
It's gotten more popular in the 2000s. It started getting popular in the 1990s. And a lot of this is sort of our taking back of our traditions, though I was told never to discuss it because with so many things, when you're German growing up, especially right after World War II, people weren't asking about German cookies or, you know what I mean? You got Italian cookies, right? So my mother's side of the family, they took over and, I could talk about all the Italian cookies we had, but the German stuff like lefse, which comes from Norway and things like that were always Christmas treats, not so much. And again, it was the sign of the times when I was growing up, but it was also in respect, at least the way my father explained it, for we had a lot of Jewish families and I was very close to them. And he didn't want memories dredged up of, the war in Germany for them. And so this was sort of a family thing.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah, and my cousin's family also, they watered it down to the point where it was a gift from St. Nicholas. Now, if you can figure out why St. Nicholas would give you a gift on his feast day, okay, it didn't make sense, but then Christmas was sort of odd to me either because it's someone else's birthday and I'm getting, a load of presents. And we're always raised, at least I think, we always look at the other side. I loved the fact my Jewish friends got a different present every night because I could appreciate them. If you came from a decently well-to-do family, you had a pile of presents and you really couldn't appreciate any of them.
Right.
And people look at me very differently when I say to them, don't go all out. What would really benefit the child through the year, whether and based on your income, that may be socks. I mean, we're going to do a thing on New Aeon Now. We're doing a comedy show the week before Christmas. And one of the things we're doing is how presents may have changed due to COVID. And it's sort of funny, but it's not, but it's the way of the world. I mean, I know people who would kill for a roll of toilet paper right now in my area. So instead of the orange, you might want the, toilet paper in the sock. But that's not a lot of fun, but a cool mask would be a lot of fun. And so I think we have to change, if you will, with the times. And I think it's now nice to have diversity, but the story of Krampus, unfortunately, paints that stereotypical light where, Germans and Austrians, we tend to be very hard on our children, right? And so, and what did I used to get called in Salem? The Ice Queen. Because, you do it or you don't. And that's how I was raised. So I can see where people would be frightened by Krampus, but if approached in a family situation, you're much happier. And if you understand Krampus Loft, which is the run, then you'll understand it's the same thing. Well, not really, but it's similar to the day after Thanksgiving, though they didn't do it here this year with COVID, but usually Santa goes around on our wonderful volunteer firemen with the truck.
Right.
And they
that's most
and
towns.
you get to see Santa going around, right? And so he's reminding you that he's watching out on you and it's Christmas time is here. Well, Krampus is sort of a rougher version of that. I mean, the Krampus Loft. No, Dewey, Krampus is not at the door. Stop it.
Otherwise.
When you've got Krampus looking in on you, if you will, it's going to be a little more frightening. But if you were raised with it, the Krampus Loft is hysterical. And in a village, you knew all the guys who were dressing up as Krampus, and they were scaring you, and you were loving it. It's like a haunted house, if you will.
That's very true, because I was watching the YouTube videos of the Krampus runs, and the kids were laughing. They were getting picked up by Krampus, and they were loving it. They were laughing and talking to the guy, and it was rather fun.
And again, if it's done in that kind of situation, I think it's wonderful. On the other hand, just some unknown gang running through the street in a Krampus outfit, okay, is terrifying. But remember, in those villages, these are the people who they know. It's usually, don't laugh, the police officers, the firefighters, the plumber, do you know what I mean? And they have fun with this. And they scare the kids, but the kids know who it is. It's Uncle Joe over there, the white Krampus. And it's okay. But, remember, this has lasted almost 2,000 years that we know of. So I don't want people to think, I've had to argue this with a few people, in different chat rooms and everything. Well, it's a modern. No, it's not. Okay, it's not. And, well, it's evil. No, it's not. Okay, it's there to have fun. Now, what often would happen, and don't laugh, traditionally, the night of the Krampus run, okay, after the Krampus run, the guys went home, got gussied up, the mothers went home, and then there was a Krampus ball on Krampusnacht, okay? So tonight there would have been a ball. Well, now think of this logically. Are the kids going to misbehave when mom and dad are at the ball when they've just been told Krampus is coming? No. So they were able to have a nice night out. The oldest kids would babysit the rest of the kids, and it makes sense. Okay, do I think the kids acted up anyway? Of course they did. But it's sort of fun if you look at it that way.
Now, you mentioned that he is 2,000 years old.
Yes.
So I am assuming that if this goes back to the old gods and traditions.
Yes, there's no question, okay, that the way he looks, and the traditional Krampus is black or dark brown, but we've seen some great white Krampuses, okay? So he doesn't have to be as hideous, though it seems like the guys lately are really having more fun making him more crampy as we go along. There's always going to be giant horns on a Krampus, and that's because, depending on who you talk to, he's a half goat, and we know where that comes from, paganism.
Sure.
And as Christianity got involved, he's half demon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you ring the cowbells and you have a good time. They run through the streets, the kids are giggling, the adults are giggling, and you can poke the Krampies with sticks, they can poke you with sticks, and you realize just how naughty you were this year. And there's nothing worse if you think about it. Again, if you're in a small village and it's not, just for TV, that, Uncle Klaus is walking by and saying to you, yep, you were the one who stole the $5 out of my wallet. Okay, now, is it really Uncle Klaus? It looks like him. It sounds like him. But how did he figure that one out? And he waited till tonight? Oh, goodness, I'm in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the story can be as hideous as you want it to be. The poem Little Orphan Annie has a reference to this, European tradition where, the bad kid, he was taken up by demons and never seen again. Often the Krampus will come in the house and allegedly take the child after beating him with sticks, wrapping him up in chains, and then going and throwing him in the river. I never heard that story as a child. It was just if you're good or bad, okay? But if you read all the old text and you even look at old Christmas cards for turn of the century,
Mm-hmm.
he's pretty scary.
Yeah.
It's at least...
the baskets and the whips and the kids screaming and all of that, yeah.
Think about it, whips and chains, not exactly your children's, love of things.
But when we stop to think about it, Lillee, when we tear apart old fairy tales,
Mm-hmm.
Not how they've been modernized, but the original versions, those were pretty darn scary.
especially the German ones. They're dark.
Yeah.
Very,
Um,
very dark. Okay. And a lot of them were to, shall we say, deliver moralistic stories. I mean, don't run out at night. We've all heard our parents say that, right? But if you heard a horrible story about two kids that were supposed to go see their grandmother, then they didn't, and the next thing you know, they're cooking in an oven, that adds a little bit to the story of I probably shouldn't go out at night.
Right.
No, it's very true. I mean, when you start to really tear apart fairy tales, some of them were just horrendous.
Oh, horrible.
Yeah. I mean, even if you look at, yeah, go ahead.
Read the original Wolf story, okay? It's so dark. It's almost, our movie dark. Okay, it's pretty dark. And there's different, depending on the area, there's different traditions around the wolf, okay? Sometimes the grandmother is the wolf. Sometimes the wolf comes along and is plotting with the grandmother. Sometimes they don't make it to the grandmother, and the wolf gets them on. It's fascinating. And I've read feminists even writing about the fact that the wolf is very reminiscent of that bad guy that's following you. And that's why you shouldn't be going on the path at night. And it all works for me because, yeah, it's tales of morality and warning, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Well, the take in the movie Company of Wolves took the Red Riding Hood story in a more, like you say, almost sexual awakening kind of concept.
I loved that movie, by the way, but I'm weird.
Oh, I love those are my kind of movies.
Now, with St. Nick, remember, he would drop off candy. See, one of the big stories on this is St. Nick tonight. Now, think about it. Why would St. Nick be out on the eve of his feast day? Okay. But
Working
Krampus,
up an appetite.
right. Krampus and St. Nicholas are hanging around together tonight. They're visiting the houses. St. Nick drops off candy in the shoes of the good kids, and Krampus will deliver birch twigs or coal. And the one show, I can't remember, I think it's called Grimm, they had the best Krampus where he'd say, "You've been naughty." And it was just classic. And that's what the problem was. So remember, if a misbehaved kid can be beaten, can disappear, stuffed, and die in Krampus's sack, or hauled off to his lair to continue to be tortured or eaten and kept in a cage or taken to be drowned. It's not, you just want to be careful with that. And you have to wonder, this is the dark side of Christmas in so many ways, okay? And there's always been, it's the dark half of the year. So there's always going to be, before we had Netflix, thousands of years ago, okay, before toilets were invented, we had, stories. We've seen this in the Celtic belief, where many stories were passed down, and to be a good storyteller really upped, your status in the community. So think about it. The story is what we've got here. And the story is preparing you in later years for the joyous Christmas. But in order to enjoy the joyous Christmas, you have to be prepared spiritually, and so you better be a darn good kid.
So this really does follow the Catholicism follows it very closely, in that you're sort of going through the dark side, the purgatory, in order to get to the paradise, right?
I see it as that. However, the tradition says that Krampus is the son of the Norse goddess of the underworld, Hel. Okay, H-E-L, for those who are wanting to write it down. I don't know why you would, but I'm just saying one L. Now, during the 12th century, the Catholic Church got angry at Krampus, okay, because they felt there was a real resemblance to the devil, which there was, okay?
Well,
and
they're devil anyway.
Right, and so that was a problem. Then in 1934, Austria's Conservative Christian Social Party tried to totally eradicate the folk practices regarding Krampus. But as you can imagine, it was just put underground. And then you would find, I have an ornament, and I have no idea where my father put it, so I continue to look for it through the Christmas stuff. But I have an ornament of Krampus, the bad Santa, that's probably over 150 years old. And those are the things, they did get that right in the Krampus movie, by the way, because many of us had ornaments on the tree, okay? But, you know, it's frightening. Refugees who have moved recently to alpine towns, they've stated their concern, and some towns consider taming the horror, but this is very, very normal for them. And whereas the costumes are frightening, again, by looking at it and educating, they will realize that really Krampus is a lot of fun. It's not a scary thing. Okay? But you can see cultural traditions of which you have no point or reference, it can be very scary. And that's not part of something that we really want to do with kids.
Well, I mean, we were talking before about the movie Krampus, but that kind of had like a Krampus who looked sort of like a Muppet. And to me, it was kind of dumbing down the whole Krampus tradition by kind of making it mellower to a certain degree, and trying to scare people at the same time, which really didn't work.
No, I agree with you. Part of that problem is what like I say, there's some beautiful scenes in that. To me, the most frightening scene was the last scene. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's never seen it. But there, you know, it's a modern take on Krampus. And you got to remember, it was the first one, though the William Shatner Christmas Horror Story is so much better in terms of a horror movie and a Krampus aspect. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it was based on a legend that has never really found its way on the big screen. And it's also fun. It's also well done. Some people will say it's family friendly. I don't know about that. Okay. If you really didn't know who Krampus was, I don't know how you'd benefit from the movie, especially the grandmother, who I was particularly touched with. But, you know, going through. Now, one thing that there is about the movie is that Max, who's one of your child there, imagined the events, okay? And so that's the first version of this, if you will. You follow that? Where it was all just a dream?
Sure.
Think of it like St. Elsewhere's final.
Sure.
That, you know, I get that. But then there's this other twist that somehow, because they've been naughty, Krampus isn't going to let them go. And the whole idea of Krampus was, unless you were a hideous, hideous person who was out to kill people in your later parts of your life, you were more to be scared. And I don't feel that there was a lot of stuff in there that I thought was a little mean-spirited. And that's what bothered me.
Very true. It also, when we look at Santa Claus, for example, the modern day Coca-Cola Santa Claus versus versus the Saint Nick that was more traditional, were completely different looking individuals and completely different persona, in my opinion.
Yes. Now, if you look at the Coca-Cola Santa, which now, I mean, for me, that's my Santa, right? That's what I was brought up with in the 60s.
Sure.
But the Coca-Cola Santa actually was a mistake of ad executives, because when they translated some descriptions of Santa Claus, they saw him as a portly man. And if I remember correctly, the word was not portly, but a man who could transport himself, be able, like for us, we might say, not, you know, coordinated, because remember, he had to jump down the chimneys. And yet they saw it as this fat, jolly man. And it was really Coca-Cola that changed our life in terms of what Santa looks like. But if you want to know something very dark, Coca-Cola also changed our lives with the Charlie Brown special, which was originally intended, you ready, to be one of the first infomercials with Charlie Brown and them all drinking Coke. That didn't go over well, and so then we got the show that we're used to now.
I don't mean to jump back a little bit, but I think you mentioned a second title that you said it really quick and you didn't want to spoil it, called Blastine. What did it say?
Blastine? No, you mean the Christmas Horror Story?
Maybe, but were you making a reference to it with the word? It sounded like Blastine, but you went right by it.
I don't remember saying that, so that's sort of bizarre.
Just before you said Christmas Horror Story, you said something that sounded like Blastine, but you didn't want to give away any spoilers, and then you mentioned William Shatner.
Well, that sort of does fit the Christmas Horror Story. I don't think I said it that way, but I could have, because I thought the Christmas Horror Story, I was so excited, right? Because I heard about it and William Shatner was in it, and I was so excited. And if you know the history behind that, that was Canadians' Krampus. And so obviously we got our Krampus, and we didn't get the Christmas Horror Story in the theaters. We got it later on. So my neighbor next door, I love her kids, and so I rented Christmas Horror Story. Now, I thought, how bad could it be? They had seen Krampus in the movie theater, right? How bad can this be, I said. Okay, so after watching it with them, two wailing children, I realized that it probably wasn't the best idea. I can't tell you enough that, well, they say it's okay for children. It's not. It's really a teen movie. Very interesting, lots of fun, and I love William Shatner. But even I was rattled by the twist at the end that was so dark, it wasn't even funny.
Wow.
It's almost like a dark comedy, like a la Heathers for Christmas.
Now I have to find it and watch it.
You gotta see it. You gotta see it.
I mean, it's on Amazon for like, $14, but, so.
No, you'll find it on one of them. They always put it on for Christmas right around there for free, because I always watch it every year. I love the movie, okay? Love it. There's so many little Easter eggs and so many neat things in there, but it's not for children. I learned that the hard way. The other movie that is for children that people don't often think of for Christmas, but because of Dewey, I always have it on, is Gremlins. And Gremlins is a great Christmas story.
Oh,
and
totally.
It's a much, there's a lot to talk about with kids after Gremlins. And if they don't want to focus on the sadness and the dark side of this thing, you've got the Gremlins to talk about. But that's a fun movie for Christmas too. For the COVID Christmas, get Christmas Horror Story, get Krampus, and of course, stream Gremlins. So much fun.
Well, yeah, that's one of the best Christmas stories.
Well, we forget that Christmas used to have that dark side, and ghost stories weren't told at Halloween. They were told at Christmas time.
Exactly, because it was the dark half of the year. And like I said, I think I interrupted myself on this, but before there was streaming, we did storytelling, okay? And so you'd be sitting around the fire, remember, no TV, no, CDs to play, and there you are. And, we now have the Yule log even to watch. Well, back then, you either had your own Yule log or you didn't watch that either. And so that's when the stories. And a lot of scrying went on Christmas, especially for young women who hadn't yet found their their man, and men who hadn't found their ladies. And, of course, we can help them with that. That'll entertain them for at least an hour.
Now the article,
and some people forgot the reason, and maybe you can discuss it too, that reason why Santa comes down the chimney was because that was the portal for spirits to enter a house.
Yes, excellent point. Yes. And the whole idea of the chimney is sort of I've read many articles, scholarly and just blogs on what everyone sees as the chimney, where Santa is almost like Krampus, if you will, and then he's reborn down the chimney to, the song, "There is something in the chimney and I don't know what it's been." Remember that one?
No.
No.
Oh my God. Bob, I love to play that on the radio because it's so gross. But it's just a sweet little song. And what happened was, it's the sweet little girl singing it. And what happened was, Santa got stuck in the chimney. And, first it's making an awful smell. And then, it's been there for a year.
Okay.
And then at the last part of the song, there's something in the chimney and Santa can't come down. But Daddy says he's been with us all year.
Oh.
It's adorable. The Bob, I want to say Weathers group, but I can look that up and send
It's Bob Rivers.
Thank you. He is awesome. That is one of the funniest and well done. When you're just sick of the traditional Christmas carols, that is you just will lose it. The restroom door said gentleman is another one that you won't survive. It's just hysterical.
But so Krampus would come down the chimney as well? I mean, which was chimneys the portal into a home for everybody?
I didn't have a chimney growing up, so
Okay.
Krampus could come different ways. Now, one night, my mother said she wouldn't let him go up on the roof. He wanted to go up and make reindeer noises on the roof. And we have a pretty big house, okay? So my father was throwing rocks up. You can imagine my mother's not so much joy with that, onto the roof at paces so it did sound like. And that kept me going for another 2 years, that there obviously is something to this. I was asleep, and I knew that Krampus was supposed to be coming, but I didn't know who was there. And the next thing you know, I hear rocks which didn't sound like rocks to me. They were reindeer hoofs. And so I stayed in my bedroom petrified. And the next thing you know, I had a present in the morning. But Krampus could come at any time. Krampus could come up behind you, okay, if you weren't doing your chores. Remember, these are villages, lots of agrarian and herds. And if you weren't doing what you were supposed to do, there's a big stick behind you. And you'll get whacked when you least likely expect it.
Now, I know the article that I was reading, it said Krampus is the devilish companion of St. Nicholas. So
they like to use that word Krampus and devil together a lot. He's not a devil if you really think about it. And it's hard to explain this to people who this is a new idea to. He looks like a devil, but if you were going to go and harass a child because they're bad and they're going to end up in the wrong direction as adults, you wouldn't dress up like the Easter Bunny to tell them this. So that's why Krampus has that scary look. And, it's... I just don't see him as the devil because, this is someone who's working with St. Nicholas. Therefore, he really couldn't be the devil unless St. Nicholas wasn't a saint, if you follow me on that.
Right.
It's like they went out together and they both had the list, and you get the naughty and you get the nice, and off they went.
Co-workers.
Which is why you hear, were you naughty or nice? I think that phrase also comes from the Europeans and the Krampus stories, because it was all about naughty or nice. So, I just don't feel, I get because when people start comparing Krampus to the devil, they're saying that something he's doing is evil. And to me, evil would be this horrible monster that comes in, and whether you've been naughty or nice, he terrorizes you, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, this is an alleged terrorizing of the worst kids. Remember, you could get nothing, or you could get coal, or you just wouldn't be there anymore.
That's right. You get coal in your stocking.
Yep. Yep. A lot of people
Yeah.
put stockings up for St. Nicholas Day.
Yeah.
And
You know, I always equated Krampus more with Pan.
exactly. I would say Krampus is a twist of Pan. He's certainly man's animal nature, okay? And I think that Krampus is the one who's the very strict parent, if you will, whereas St. Nicholas always sees the best in the little monsters, right? Because you can go to Santa and tell him that, you know, you want to be better, and then you might get better gifts. I mean, it's really psychologically, there's a whole nother phase of this, but it's really not a bad thing, okay? And remember, it's for someone who is not respecting the spirit of the season. What is the spirit of Christmas? Okay, or Yule? Community, right? Being together, celebrating family. And this has gone through thousands of years. This is not, you know, yesterday. Now, it's not COVID Christmas, so we have Krampus. He's been there trying to keep the family together, if you will, and trying to keep the kids in check.
So, I mean, when we look at the whole Christmas holiday with Krampus included in it,
Yep.
it's almost a lesson for kids in karma.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you're not threatened. Okay, if Krampus gave you coal, you know what you did. All right. Yeah, I mean, you know, kids are excellent
Sure.
at, you know, well, it was not my fault. Yeah, I ate all the cookies, and then we didn't have any cookies for Thanksgiving. But, you know, it wasn't my fault. So that may be a situation where there's coal and everybody else might get cookies on St. Nicholas Day. And he'll see that, okay, and realize that everybody knows it was your fault. And, you know, it's a cautionary tale. And really, Krampus is there for respect, appreciation, and the holiday traditions and values, and even further, the community tradition and values.
True, because I don't understand the Krampus run bit, but my guess is that it was simply a social gathering where it could be a community celebration.
Yes, and keep in mind again, they all dress up. It's something fun for the men to do, okay? They all outdo each other with their outfits. Sometimes outfits and skins are handed down from generation to generation. And so after, you know, 3 years, from 7 to 10, you know that's Uncle James in that, you know, white outfit over there. Okay, but it's still the scary thing, the cowbells going off, and it's a sight and sound in terms of the senses. It's cold, there's sight, there's sound, and you're with your family. It's not like they put all the kids in a room and left a Krampus in there and turned off the lights. You're with your family, and it's a family-oriented event, much like I would say if you just reversed roles, like a Halloween costume contest. Sometimes today they'll have the best Krampus contest.
Mhm.
Okay. And again, it's a great excuse for the guys to be out there having fun, doing a little drinking. And this was part of the traditions. I think we all can understand in the 30s and 40s, 50s, and maybe even the 60s, this would not have been taken well in the United States. And there's a
Sure.
lot of reasons
Right.
for that.
Right. Well, now, it's like Santa Claus, I guess, you know, it's like you better be good because he knows if you've been bad or good. But they're mainly
Right.
talking to the children.
Right.
Is Krampus more for the kids to shape up?
Absolutely. It's for the kids to shape up.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure you could really scare your wife or husband by putting some birch twigs by the bed and then say, "Oh,
Kinky.
wow, Do you have something to tell me? But really, it's for the children. And it's, if you know kids who've been brought up with this, they laugh and giggle and they like Krampus. To them, it is the elf on the shelf. Do they believe that Krampus is there? But again, this naughty or nice thing, it doesn't make sense with Santa because Santa looks at the best of everyone, right?
Right.
And so the naughty was taken care of by Krampus. Now, just to give you another thing, because it's COVID Christmas, as I'm calling it, okay, if you really want to get into movies, check out Mother Krampus. I know, I don't, it's not the best movie I've ever found, but it's based on the myth of Frau Perchta, a witch that comes on the 12 days of Christmas and she abducts a child every night. So there's different takes on this. You can hear about Black Peter depending on the different cultural traditions in the area. But there's certain, all through that area, okay, in the the Western European area and in Eastern Europe too, in some places, there are these, shall we say, antagonists to the all good Klaus.
So are they still doing this a lot in Europe?
It's growing, but as a tourist thing.
Okay.
Okay. So, you and I would probably love, if it wasn't COVID, to go to Austria and see. Many of the places have international now visitors to watch the Krampusloft. Okay. And I'm for that and I'm against that only because, remember, these are community events. Okay. And sure, it's a great way to get tourism, except with COVID. But, you really couldn't have the long tongue and everything coming over at you.
No.
For safety with COVID.
Right.
But, yeah, it's there, okay? And it's now here. I've heard of Krampus runs and Krampus parties in New York, Massachusetts, Florida, California. I think there was one in Texas. And I think there's one in Minnesota now.
The Krampus ball.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, the whole idea, if you ever saw, the one thing that reminded me of a Krampus ball, if you will, if you've ever seen Rammstein's, oh my goodness, what is Du riechst so gut? You smell so good? On their video, they have one of those balls. And it's really cool, the way they put it into the story of a werewolf.
Ooh, I have to look at that one now.
Oh, it's awesome.
So
You want the original, not the other one.
Okay.
So is Krampus still popularized in Europe
Yes.
as
and
far as the
even more now.
kids?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are more Krampus books than there ever have been. Remember, before the wars, it was popular. You would get Christmas cards with Krampus on them. Okay, the wars happened, and, this was pretty well put under the cover. And now it's coming out more. I think we are becoming less of a society of fear in terms of, you couldn't have witchcraft circles the way they do in Salem
Right.
40 years ago, right?
Right.
But I always worry that they hoodwink Krampus into something that he's not. He is what he is. He's not out to steal children. And one of my friends said, "Is that the German way to get rid of a bad kid?"
Keep the receipt.
I tried to explain that really wasn't the story. I mean, if I were writing a book about Krampus, I've always wanted to write, don't steal my idea, people, but you can if you really want to, is that the parent takes the bad kid out, right? Wraps him in the chains, throws him in the river because he's just a very bad kid. And then the mystery, did Krampus do it? And, developing the characters. So some of them are believing it. Do you know what I mean? That it must have been Krampus because this kid was a terrible kid. And looking at things in terms of a commentary on life as to, is a really bad kid at like 12 when hormones are racing, does that really predict a horrible, horrible child who's going to kill people? And so that's what I've always thought with Krampus. You don't make it, I think, if anything with Krampus, it's the fun of his tongue and the horns. And he's just, I'll tell you someone who I bet you don't think was based on Krampus. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gene Simmons.
No, Gene Simmons might be Krampus in real life. Just saying, he's got the tongue.
Yeah.
But no,
Fact.
what very popular holiday story, okay, that again, I would have been brought up with, I think every kid would have been brought up with from the 60s on, is really about Krampus. Any guesses?
Grinch? The
Yes,
Grinch.
very good.
Yay.
What?
Dr.
Grinch.
Seuss was a German.
Oh, the Grinch. Ah.
Yep. And remember, what was he really trying to do?
Stop Christmas.
Was he?
With the noise.
Well, no, he
Well,
was.
the
I
noise.
think he was trying. He was trying to get revenge on people that slighted him. But
Well, you're thinking of the feature film, not the
well, yeah,
original.
not the
Dr.
original.
Seuss.
It was,
Yeah.
No, in the original. Think about it.
Yeah.
He did love Cindy Lou Who because she
Yeah,
had
he
the
did.
magic of Christmas,
Hmm.
right? And then he was able to see the magic of Christmas with everyone.
See, redemption sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. And why did he go and steal all their stuff? Remember the dog? The dog is the best part of that whole show.
And
I
Max,
still
Max,
think
sorry,
it's
yes.
the best. Okay. And he takes all their stuff. Why? Is it because that they're not appreciating it, or they're taking it for granted and he has nothing?
I think it was more that it really came down to the fact he didn't like their singing and just really annoyed by the noise.
Or so he says.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that has been documented that's Grinch is based on Krampus.
That makes
And
total sense.
that makes sense. And if you think about it with Dr. Seuss wrote very some dark stuff too. There's one poem he wrote about being in the dark with a monster. It was a riot. And I used to love that page in my book. In fact, I tore it out and put it on my wall to my mother's fear. But it was a little, this is Clark. We found him in the dark, in the park. And it's this monster in a cage. It's adorable. But the thing about this is, I don't think in the 60s we were ready to have Krampus beating Cindy Lou Who with a stick. Okay.
Right.
So, but we were ready to understand the meaning of Christmas. And that poor Charlie Brown Coca-Cola tale, if you really, I cry every time I watch that one because it's so emotional for me when Charlie Brown picks the most pathetic tree, because that's how I was. I always wanted like the broken reindeer. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And
Okay.
the broke, because nobody else would take it, and it deserved a home too.
Mhm.
But I don't know if that's being an only child or what the deal is, but I felt sorry for those that might be alone at Christmas. So I would always pick the crappy tree, and my father would yell at me.
So
Um,
that's
but-
like the island with the misfit toys.
I loved the island with the misfit toys. Okay.
I
And
still want to know what was wrong with the doll.
wasn't
I've
it
never
something
understood. The
about
little
she-
dolly seemed perfectly fine.
Right, but she didn't cry. She wasn't happy. She cried or something. I'd have to see it again, but there was something wrong with her too.
Yeah.
Whether she didn't
Yeah.
cry at the right time. But yeah, I loved Misfit Toys. And that talks a lot about, again, a cautionary tale, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the Bumble, I mean, talk about adorable.
Oh yeah.
The abominable snowman. Yeah.
But see, I look at Wizard of Oz as one of the greatest tales of all time.
It's my favorite movie of the whole world, and I love the books.
Which
and
one?
he comes from my hometown.
Which,
L. Frank Baum? Oh, okay.
Yes. We also have, that's Pugsley choking to death. He gets all excited about drinking his water. He's the pug. And then he's choking to death after he drinks it too fast. But we have a house here in Fayetteville that's now the Gage House. And that's where he lived for a while. But he was originally from Chittenango. Here's some trivia for you. And in Chittenango, in the sidewalk, we have a yellow brick road.
Oh,
wow.
So, they have, I don't know if it's still open because of COVID, but we used to have a beautiful Wizard of Oz museum with all the original books and everything else. And it's
Wow.
really, for someone like me, it's really fun. Now, just to let you know this, my cousin had to go to see a therapist because she was so afraid of the Wicked Witch.
Oh,
And I was so thrilled with the
wow.
Wicked Witch that now I have my flying monkeys, which are my little gremlins.
Oh,
But,
Yeah.
you know, everybody takes it differently.
wow.
Well, Margaret Hamilton and I became friends the last few years of her life. She only lived in New York City, and she was very sweet, and she was really tiny. But it was really cool that she and I were both correspondents, and when we saw each other, she called me a friend in front to one of her friends. She referred to me as a friend of hers.
Well, I am honored to be talking to you because I think without her, okay, that would not have been a good movie. Everybody looks at, you know, the three, and I mean, to me, her and the Cowardly Lion, as you know,
Mhm.
that was switched around
Bert
at the
Lahr.
last minute too. Bert Lahr, yeah. But
Well, Bert
now-
Lahr was cast as the lion. Scarecrow, Ray Bolger was originally going to be cast as a Tin Man, and he fought it, and he pointed out that when he got his contract with MGM, he wanted to play the Scarecrow so much he had that as a clause in his contract. If they ever made The Wizard of Oz, he would play the Scarecrow.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and then of course we almost lost Matlock because he was nearly killed with the Tin Man makeup.
Yep.
And replaced by Jack Haley, and they didn't bother to tell him. By the way, you know, you're replacing someone who almost died at our hands.
Yeah, is that friendly fire, I wonder?
Well, Margaret's injury was the second take. The take we see in the movie was the first take of the fireball.
Did she get hurt by it?
Oh, she was horribly injured. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
when she went down the second time they did the second take, something it went off like a fraction of a second too soon, and it caught fire at the end of her broom and the brim of her hat. And she was very and of course the makeup was copper based.
Of course.
So it was like insanely painful just to remove that. And she was on bed rest for a time. And one of the studio heads called to say, you know, ask how she was. Unfortunately, either her agent or manager or somebody that she knew grabbed the phone and just reamed the guy saying, you know, you're lucky she doesn't sue you into a billion pieces, because she later thought, you know, it's possible it could have been recording it and you say, how are you? And you automatically say, well, I'm fine or something to avoid a lawsuit.
Yep.
But yeah, fortunately she had someone to belay that.
Wow.
Well, you know, I think we don't appreciate what happened with Michael Jackson after his little fireball incident.
Oh yeah.
You know, the pain involved. Can you imagine? Awful.
Wow.
But I still want
Yeah.
a flying monkey.
You want to
Oh,
fly
I know.
a
I love
monkey,
the. I have countless photos that I save that I repost, where they say, you know, flying monkeys, you know, scaring the daylights out of people since 1939.
Yes.
All
That
right.
to me is one of the most wonderful powers, but I don't know. I just think, you know, if we don't have magic in our lives, and I'm not talking about being a witch or a mage or a shaman, I'm talking about the simple magic that is life and the rituals and traditions that we hold dear. There is something magical about Krampus night. There is something magical about Christmas Eve. And, you know, even when you take the religion out of it, it can still be so emotional and spiritual.
Mm.
Okay. And even if you choose to celebrate Yule, it can still be so emotional and spiritual. And I think that's where a lot of this magic and the supernatural gets into these holidays.
We're going to go ahead and take us a quick break. And just to let you know, Lillee, that your mic will be live, so don't say anything. You will not hear any of the commercials. And you'll hear me when I come back on the air. And then you'll know that we're back on. So,
You got it.
So with that, Jeff, you want to take us out?
Yeah, you're listening to the Paranormal View with your hosts, Henry Foister, Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with tonight's wonderful guest, Lillee Allee, talking about Krampus. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.